All right, so imagine this, okay? And remember, I'm in the business. Let me frame it this way. Imagine that you find a home that you fall in love with. Let's say it's the home of your dreams. You know, maybe you've been searching for months, maybe it's been weeks, maybe it's even been years. You make an offer, negotiations go smoothly, but then you get tangled into this brand new maze of government rules that are going to slow down the deal, muddy up the process, spark legal risks, and leave both you and the seller potentially worse off, at least in my opinion. This is what is happening in Massachusetts, of course, with the so-called new home inspection waiver regulations. So today, as requested, I'm going to break this down for you, and I'm going to explain why these regulations are, not only a bureaucratic overreach, but they could really end up hurting both buyers and sellers and the entire housing market in and there and of itself, okay? I'm going to do it like this, okay, from this angle. Maybe you haven't heard this before, because what is really going on is let's call it a creeping erosion of choice and a creeping erosion of responsibility under the guise of consumer protection. First, let's just call this what it is, guys. This is a top-down mandate on what should be a private negotiation between consenting adults, right? And according to this proposal, these regulations, at least on the seller side or their agent, they can't even accept an offer if a buyer signals, let's say in advance, that they may waive their inspection, even if both parties freely agree that doing so makes sense per the situation. This is being framed as protecting buyers. But what it really does is it treats buyers, if they are incapable of making adult decisions about their own finances and about buying a home on their own. That's what it is. So in practice, it really undermines their ability to compete in today's crazy market, this fast-moving market. And if a buyer wants to waive an inspection, right, because they've already walked the property, maybe they have some really savvy agent, whatever it may be. Maybe they worked in construction, whatever it is, or simply because they want to strengthen their offer, I think that that's their right to do so. Or at the very least, I think that it should be. So what the state is doing here is they're substituting its judgment for theirs, meaning for buyers. It's a problem, and I think it's a little bit insulting as well. So let me talk about the seller side, right? So if you're a seller, these new rules, what they do is they create a hidden trap for them. So the state is mandating that there's a new 10-day window for inspections to happen. So an offer gets accepted, the seller doesn't know whether there's inspections or not, and then there's a 10-day window for buyers to decide. I think this sounds reasonable on paper until you remember that during this time, your property is effectively off the market. And if the deal falls apart on day 9, the seller has lost critical time in a competitive market. What's worse is that these regulations make it very ambiguous whether a buyer can explicitly waive the inspection period after the offer is accepted, even if both parties agree to move quickly. So meaning an offer gets accepted, there's the 10-day window for inspections. It's still up for debate whether or not the buyer has to perform them or not. So in short, the sellers are going to lose flexibility. They're going to face levels of uncertainty and may even be forced to hold inventory longer, all of which raises carrying costs. And, when you take a property off the market after it's already been on, it's really a bad look as being back on market, right? And in a state like Massachusetts, where housing supply is already constrained, that's the last thing that we need, because it could circumvent sellers from actually wanting to put their home on the market for one reason or another. But here's where it gets worse. Let's say the seller knows ahead of time that the buyer intends to waive their inspections. Under these new rules, if the seller accepts that offer in any way, they've now committed a legal violation, right? That's what's happening. The regulation flat out prohibits sellers from accepting an offer if they've been informed directly and or indirectly that the buyer plans to waive an inspection or limit their inspection. And if they do accept it, guess what? They're automatically exposed to a violation of Massachusetts consumer protection law. I can't believe I'm saying this shit. I really can't believe I'm saying this. And of course, that could bring damages, attorney fees, risk of lawsuit, whatever it may be. So think about it like this, guys. Even if both parties want the deal to move forward, even if they both agree in good faith to waive the inspection, the law is now punishing them for trying to do what's, let's say, in the best interest of their own, right? That's basically what this is. That's not protection. That's like a legal minefield is what it is. It just opens up more liability for litigation. And here's another angle I don't think many people talked about. The legal risks for real estate agents. I know you guys probably do not care about this, right? But I'm going to say it anyway. The regulations create a situation where an agent could face automatic violations under consumer protection law just for a technical misstep in disclosure, even if they have no control over whether their clients accept the offer or not. I feel like this is a dangerous precedent that Massachusetts is trying to set potentially for other states. So in turn, it means that agents are now being held liable for decisions that they are that are rightly in their clients' hands to make. That's just not bad policy. It violates the basic principles of agency law. If you are a professional trying to help clients navigate the market, a transaction, whatever it is, whenever there's levels of uncertainty, guess what? It ends up being a nightmare. And consider this. The professional associations representing real estate agents, NAR, let's say mortgage brokers and developers, a lot of people are upset about this. When the people who work with buyers and sellers every single day are unanimously telling the state that this will not work, I would think maybe they should listen to the professionals, right? Instead of getting involved in situations they may not know enough about. And one of the most egregious parts of this regulation is the exemptions, right? So if you're a licensed home inspector, they would be allowed to waive inspections for themselves. So think about it like this. The supposed goal here is to put all buyers on a level playing field. But this carves out this paradigm of privilege where a certain class of buyers that are home inspectors, they're going to have an unfair advantage. And let's be blunt about this. This could potentially lead down the path of a risk of violating discrimination, right? If the home inspector is overwhelmingly of a certain group or a certain class, by creating special exemptions for one professional group, the state is inadvertently giving a leg up to a narrow demographic, all while leaving others at a disadvantage. How is that fair? That's not fairness. That is a systematic bias dressed up in regulatory language. Every single time the government gets involved in something like this, I feel like they are not talking to people in the field. I feel like they're literally firing from the hip. And at the end of the day, this isn't about the inspections. It's about people's choice in a free market. It's about respecting the ability of buyers and sellers to negotiate terms that fit their needs and circumstances. And if the government keeps stepping into micromanage private real estate deals, we'll end up with a slower, more expensive, and the process will open up for more litigation. I'll just call it like it is. The fact of the matter is, buyers will face fewer options. Sellers will be deterred from listing. Some sellers and agents, the people who actually work to make these transactions, go smoothly, they will be buried under liability concerns. So, in other words, this regulation, while everything has, let's say, well intent, right? And that solution, this is like a solution in search of a problem, right? And like so many other of these government mandates, it ends up hurting the very people it claims to protect, period, hands down. So, I mean, am I wrong on this? Is this a bad take? I feel like the government is having too much say in private real estate deals. And I think that buyers and sellers shouldn't lose their freedom to negotiate. I really don't. And the fact is, by creating these crazy mandates, my overarching opinion on stuff like this is like, the more the government does these mandates and the more the government gets their hands into certain things, what it does is it creates this narrative of more mandates in the future that would otherwise be ridiculous. And by the way, I think that this mandate is something that is exclusive, at least in the language that's been presented here. I pretty much think it's exclusive to Massachusetts. So again, here we are, making things more complicated for people. And I'm not saying that people should either waive an inspection or should do an inspection. It is very property specific. And one of the things that I saw the news do is they tried to claim, and this was with one of the judges, Bronsberger, I think his name. He's been involved in some other things as well. He's a problem, okay? But anyway, they brought up the example of, I think is it pyrite or something like that in the concrete. And there was some areas, I believe, in central or south central Massachusetts and parts of Connecticut that had this, let's say, material in the concrete, and something happened to the foundations. The problem is that look at it this way. Usually when you do a home inspection, you're doing a home inspection. You're not sending concrete samples out to test. And I don't even know how long this takes, right? I've been doing this for 10 years. I've never sent a concrete sample out for testing. And by the way, I don't think that any seller is going to put themselves in a position, at least not right now, given the circumstances where it's a free market and buyers could choose to do inspections or not. I don't think that a seller would ever accept an offer with the contingency to do that sort of invasive inspection. No, I'm not saying not to protect buyers or not to protect sellers here. I'm just saying that the circumstances are, I don't even know how long it takes to get these tests back, right? Like, if anything at all, if they were that concerned about the concrete, then what they should have done is they should have mandated that sellers do the home inspection on their home first, and then include that within the inspection, and then provide that inspection over to buyers. I feel like that is a much easier way. Again, it sucks on both sides because it does open the seller up for, like, let's say a material defect on their home that they may have to disclose in some way or another. But if they're so concerned about the concrete, why don't they make it a Title V like they do with septics, like septic tanks? You can't close on a house unless you have a passing Title V certificate. If they're that concerned about the concrete, and if that's what the big deal is here, as they pointed out in one of the videos, well, guess what? That is a lengthy and costly process for a home buyer to do. Put it on the seller prior to listing their home. If they're that concerned about the concrete, have a company come out, take a sample of that concrete, send it out, and meanwhile, while the home inspector is there, do a home inspection, provide the home inspection report, and provide a certificate for the concrete. Period. Done deal. End of story. Not create this narrative where a seller doesn't know whether a buyer is doing an inspection or not, and whether that is, like, they're losing some negotiating power here, right? Another thing, like 35 to 40% of homes in Eastern Massachusetts sell to cash buyers, right? This is a problem, okay? It used to be like 17 or 18% back in the day, back in 2017, 2018, 2019. Now, you have a third of the market. You figure 1 in every 3 homes that you go to buy, you may be competing with a cash buyer out there. I mean, I'm not saying that they should get involved in this. I'm just saying that what it does is it provides more opportunity for cash buyers to get an offer accepted than otherwise. Because if you have cash, you don't have to do an appraisal if you don't want to. There's no mortgage contingency because you have the cash. You're providing proof of funds. Like, if they want these homes to go to potential, let's say, families and buyers, then create something with that, or create this opportunity for people that are, let's say, home buyers, right? Have a family, and give them the incentive to write an offer first before it gets, passed off to a developer or to somebody that's going to rehabilitate the property. Again, I have a lot of friends that are developers and that I work with in this field. I know this is not a good idea on your end, but it would, I think, be a way or a path forward to open up opportunities within the market itself for people that actually want to buy the home and to live in the home. These are just some one-off ideas, okay? I would have to go through pre-planning and figure out all of the angles here, but this is literally off the top of my head. So again, they want to create these mandates. They want to do this top-down regulation. And what it does is it constricts the marketplace, and it leaves people in a position where there's more uncertainty than certainty. Just like what happened with the buyer agency contracts, like agents are still confused. Like we have 150 agents throughout 5 states, right? People are still confused whether it's our agents on the buy side or buyer agents when we're listing a property, like, because different brokerages are doing different things, and it just is it's a freaking mess is what it is. So every single time you're getting involved in private deals, you know what? As a matter of fact, if they want to get so involved with private deals, how about all the money that we're spending? Okay, we're spending public money for private profit. How about they get involved in that? Okay, how about putting your energy towards things that people actually care about, not limiting sellers and buyers in negotiation points in an actual contract of selling private real estate? I mean, Jesus, it's unbelievable to me. All right, that's probably it because I'm getting pissed off. That's it for today's video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.